Aloha, it's Joe Pardavila, and you're listening to the Forbes Books Podcast. And since 2000, I've had the honor of having amazing conversations with entrepreneurs and executives who navigated their organizations through the COVID-19 crisis. But this week, I'm joined by a business leader who literally navigated her team through the pandemic. Her name is Lucinda Baier. She's the CEO of Brookdale Senior Living, an operator of senior living communities across the country. She's here to talk about what it's been like over the last couple years and why she was inspired to write the new book, Heroes Work Here, an extraordinary story of courage, resilience, and hope from the front lines of COVID-19. Cindy, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So before we get started, let's talk about senior living in general, because when I relocated to Charleston, South Carolina, all of a sudden I started seeing all these developments for senior living communities. And I was like, wow, are there just more older people? So I was wondering, it seems like there's more and more of these. Is it just me noticing it, or are you seeing that as well, that there's more of these communities being built across the United States?
You know, Joe, there are approximately 28,900 assisted living communities and have 1 million licensed beds in the United States today, according to a survey by ACA. Now, I will say that the pandemic really tempered the amount of new construction. There were fewer developers who started new construction during the pandemic. And now, as you know, we have both rising construction costs and higher interest rates. So that bodes well for less new supply for the near term. But it's important to know that in 2022, the baby boomer demographics are finally to a point that we dreamed about 15 years ago. There's a rapidly growing senior living population, and they require high-quality, needs-based services. Starting this year, we expect more than 1 million new seniors will enter our target market every single year for the rest of the decade.
Wow.
And if you think about it, between 2021 and 2025, there is a projected increase of 20% of the number of individuals who are 75 or older. So we really need all this inventory.
So I almost feel like we talk about housing crisis for the affordable housing industry. It almost sounds like we're going to have a housing crisis for the seniors and the boomers. I mean, just the way you're describing the fact that the building has kind of slowed down and all these other issues we've run into with supply chain and pandemic. Are we going to see a crisis, you think?
I don't know if we'll see a crisis, because I think as time passes, people will look at the number of baby boomers who need an option to living alone at home, and they'll put their projects together. But for now, we're grateful that the supply is constrained.
Okay, good. All right, so let's get a little context about your home turf there, Brookdale Senior Living. I know you operate hundreds of communities with thousands of residents. So where are they located, and what kind of services do you provide there?
Brookdale is the nation's premier operator of senior living communities. We operate and manage 678 communities in 41 states. We have the ability to serve more than 60,000 residents in our communities. And our services range from independent living to assisted living to memory care. And let me tell you just a little bit about what each of those are. Independent living is ideal for individuals who still live independently, but enjoy having access to certain conveniences like dining, entertainment, and camaraderie. Assisted living is everything that you see in independent living, but it's a great option for individuals who have difficulty with the daily activities at home. And then memory care is designed to provide a safe, structured environment to set routines and help improve the quality of life for those people who live with Alzheimer's or dementia.
And so here's my question about the assist. I see the term active adult thrown around a lot lately, which is such a weird term because aren't most adults active? Right? Why do you think people have gravitated to that term, active adult?
When you think about active adult, it's more like housing or an apartment.
Yeah.
It's less about the services that you see in senior living. Often in senior living, what you're really trying to solve for is loneliness. So you're trying to build a community of friends. And that's really what differentiates independent living, assisted living, and memory care from active adult, which is more of an independent lifestyle.
Okay, cool. So you became CEO in 2018, and then 2 years later, boom, the the pandemic hits. I'm curious, what was life like as a CEO from, say, 2018 to March of 2020, and how did it change after that?
I would say that my role during 2018 to 2020 was incredibly intense. We were constantly focused on learning, on solving problems, on aligning the organization around our most important priority, which we called our North Star. And that was the health and well-being of our residents and associates. I spent that period of time being filled with gratitude for the extraordinary efforts and the teamwork of our Brookdale associates. And also, I have a great admiration for our residents because they led the way to a brighter future through their rapid adoption of life-saving COVID-19 vaccines. For me, the pandemic started before it really reached the shores of the United States. And Jim Seward, a former member of our board of directors, reached out to me one day in January, and he talked to me about what was happening in Wuhan. And once I saw that and the potential threat to our residents, we took fast and focused action to help protect our residents. We established a command center, which was the central point for clear decisions and consistent communication. We were always focused on how do we help protect our residents and our associates. And I'm really proud of the fact that every day during the pandemic, even during the most difficult times, our associates focused on what mattered most, the health and well-being of our residents and associates. Everyone led by example. We encouraged gratitude, empathy, and active listening. We demonstrated the courage and the passion that it really takes to do the right thing. And I think that described our experience during the pandemic. But in an ordinary day, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, I spend most of my time focused on our mission, and that's really enriching the lives of those we serve with compassion, respect, excellence, and integrity, and creating a culture of caring where we genuinely care about the people who work with us and the people we serve in our communities, and we always rally behind those in need. It's a little bit more normal now, a little less intense, but we are still filled with gratitude for everyone that is part of our Brookdale extended family.
And the last couple of years inspired you to write your new book, which, congratulations, was just published. Heroes Work Here, an extraordinary story of courage, resilience, and hope from the front lines of COVID-19, with all net proceeds of the sale benefiting Brookdale's Associate Compassion Fund. So my first question here is, why a book? Why did you feel like it was important to tell the story of Brookdale during the pandemic?
I was inspired by the heroic actions of our Brookdale associates. And, I've worked in a lot of industries during my life, but never one as important and inspiring as senior living. I wanted to make sure that we could share the knowledge that we learned from the most difficult days of the pandemic. And this book really has two purposes. First, it serves as a guide for leaders who are trying to navigate their organizations through uncharted waters for the greater good of society and their companies. And second, it serves as a keepsake for those leaders who stepped up when it really mattered most.
And before we dig into the book a little more, I mentioned Brookdale's Associate Compassion Fund. Can you explain to me what that does?
Yes, I can. At Brookdale, we rally behind those in need. So we created a nonprofit associate compassion fund, and it really provides financial support to associates who are dealing with financial challenge through no fault of their own. It could be because of a natural disaster, a health issue, or even a death in the family. And so we want to be there when people need us and to provide financial support to help them through difficult times.
Wow. So this is a fund for your employees in case they need it?
Yes, absolutely.
I've been working in business podcasts for a couple of years. I've never heard of anything like this. How did this come about?
Well, Brookdale is very mission driven. And as I said earlier, we have a culture of caring. The fund was established before I joined the company, but it was really a way to help give back. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is that our business is all about people helping other people. And so we have raised funds from our associates, our Our leadership team has made incredible contributions, as has our board of directors. And now the net proceeds from our book, Heroes Work Here, will be funneled right back to our associates who are truly the heroes of the story. And so it's only fitting that the net proceeds from the book will help them when they need it most.
Wow, what a great concept. Do other companies do anything like that? Because like I said, I've never heard of something like that before. I mean, it just seems like an obvious thing to do for companies, but this seems so new to me right now.
I have not seen it in organizations at the scale of Brookdale.
Wow, that is awesome. And I always like to joke because I like to look at the bright side of things and joke when I can. But the last couple of years have been a lot for a lot of people. What was it like to lead Brookdale through like such a huge public health crisis, the largest we've seen in hundreds of years, when your residents are the most at-risk demographic?
It was intense. There is no doubt about it. What we focused on was really being a nimble learning organization. So we scoured the world for the latest developments. We spent a lot of time learning, absorbing that knowledge, communicating it. We were very public with what we knew and what we didn't. In fact, at the early stages of the pandemic, we created a website that had toolkits for anyone in the industry who had videos with the information that was relevant to the day. And we just knew that every day our actions made a difference. And so we united around our mission and everyone brought their best to the table.
And how about you as a leader? I know you like to deflect any kind of credit or anything like that, but for you as a leader, seeing what was happening, I mean, for someone like me on the outside who's just watching the news reports in the early days of the pandemic, how these senior communities were hit so hard by it, how were you able to stay sort of sane during all of that?
Again, I am very mission driven. I entered this industry because as a child, I learned how important our services were. My mom had a very serious car accident that almost cost her life. So I became a caregiver before I was even in high school. And so what I always focused on was how important the services that we provide are, our obligation to the residents and the families that we serve. And I always thought about how could I make a difference today? And if I had an ounce of energy, I knew that I was going to devote that to our residents and our associates, because as you said, it was an incredibly important time in history. And we were at the center of an important time.
You know, one of the images I can't get out of my brain about the pandemic from especially like that early days were the shots of that senior facility in Washington, where the original, the early cases of COVID came in, and just seeing people waiting outside and not being able to visit their family. And you see, ambulances lined up outside to take people out. When you were seeing that, even though you kind of got tipped off in January, when you saw those reports, were you like, oh my God, what are we going to do here?
So our goal was to keep COVID-19 out of our communities. And if we could not keep it out of the community, to mitigate the spread within the communities. And so I'm really proud of our efforts to secure personal protective equipment when it was very difficult, if not impossible, to secure in the United States. We needed to scour the globe for hundreds of vendors to meet our needs. And so my focus really was on making sure that our teams had the knowledge, the procedures, and the resources necessary to do everything that we could to help protect our residents and associates.
And, one of the results of the pandemic is people decided, listen, I don't like my job, because they had time away from it. They were like, I don't want to do that anymore. And it spawned what many call the Great Resignation. And since we can't have a conversation nowadays in the world of business without discussing it, I need to ask you, are you experiencing staffing shortages? Is staffing going to be one of the biggest problems when it comes to growing Brookdale in the future?
Let me start by saying that we have increased our number of associates every single month for the last 6 months.
Wow.
And I am incredibly proud of that. Now, at the same
Wait,
time,
hold on. Before you do that, Cindy, why? I mean, how were you able to pull off when I'm walking up and down the street and I see stores and restaurants with help wanted signs in perpetuity? Why have you been able to grow?
I think that the focus on our mission is critically important. We attract residents and associates who want to be part of something that's bigger than themselves. And for associates, we've been very focused on creating a culture that people want to be part of. And if you think about it, associates really have more career options at a company our size. If you think about our size and scale, it's unmatched in the senior living industry, and that really provides tremendous opportunities to serve and grow. We've got communities located all over the United States, and so people can move between communities if they want to move to a different part of the United States. They can move between corporate and the field, between field and the corporate. And we have more resources than any other company in our industry because we've got such deep subject matter expertise to support our associates, whether that's clinical expertise, dining, resident programming, asset management. We spend a lot of time and effort on development and career opportunities so that our people can grow both personally and professionally. And I think that makes a difference. So it's not just attractive compensation and benefits. It's being part of something that's bigger than yourself and to be able to grow with Brookdale.
You know, I always I try to keep things as simple as possible, Cindy, because I'm not as bright as people like yourself who run businesses. But I always try to dumb things down as easy to the simplest form. And what I feel the Great Resignation is about is the fact that people just their jerk meter just shut off. They're like, I no longer want to either work with jerks or work for a jerk. And companies that don't have a lot of jerks around, I think they're the ones that are not experiencing any of this. Do you feel like a lot of it is just because people's mindset has shifted from, I'm like you mentioned, it's not just about the pay, it's about the purpose. So do you think it's just people recognize because they had this break, whether it was a lockdown or because of major restrictions, that they realize, wait a minute, I'm so much happier, outside of the pandemic, but I'm a happier, more fulfilled person when I don't have to deal with that other stuff?
I think that everyone, or at least most people, reevaluated what was most important during the pandemic. And if you think about the level of change that most Americans faced, it was intense, right? Parents saw their children needing to be homeschooled. People worked from home in a way that they hadn't before. And so I think it opened up our eyes to what was possible. And I think that, at Brookdale, I'm happy about the fact that we've taken the best learnings from the pandemic and we have built that into our business model. But I think that people are really reevaluating their lives and trying to make sure that they create the life that they want, and nothing less than that is acceptable.
And it sounds like you're not only building a community for the seniors that live there, you're building a community, you're almost building an actual community because the employees are part of it.
I feel like our associates, our residents, and family members are all one big extended family. And that was even more important during the pandemic because our residents relied on our associates for companionship as well as for the support they needed for their activities of daily living.
And one of the chapters of your book, Cultivating Community Engagement, I'm a big food truck person. You can't get enough food trucks. I go to a food truck at least once a week. Can you tell the little food truck story about what you did with your associates?
Absolutely. During the pandemic, communal dining was something that was challenging. And so we needed to close our dining rooms at some point during the pandemic, early in the pandemic. And we needed to have residents eat in their meals. But if you think about 3 meals a day in your apartment, it needs to be engaging. And so we had our associates who created all sorts of different dining concepts. And one of those was a food truck. And so they would bring the meals around to the resident rooms in a cart that was designed like a food truck. And it was themed, whether it was spa day, which was homemade granola and yogurt and fresh squeezed orange juice, or it could have been something like a Mexican theme where they would dress up and play Mexican music as meals were being delivered. It really added a sense of engagement to mealtime, which was really helpful.
Wow. Do the residents understand that that is not normal? Like, I can't imagine many senior living communities doing that. And I understand that they're there because they expect great service and care, but do they realize what special care they're getting there?
I think our associates felt very valued by residents and their families during the pandemic. There are so many stories of the bonds that were formed and the relationships, whether it would be residents writing poems to associates and vice versa. But I do think that those connections mean a lot to both the resident and associate.
And the residents seem very active as well. We talked about active adults. They're pretty active. And in Houston, didn't they do a project where they hung like 500 hearts or something like that?
Yeah, you're talking about Brookdale Galleria.
Okay.
And this is a big high-rise community in Houston. And the residents wanted to show their spirit. So they had hearts that they put in the windows of the community. And it was something that just was to demonstrate the love that they felt for each other and for the world. And it was a brilliant demonstration by our residents and our associates of the spirit that lives within a senior living community.
And one thing about senior living is people grow old, and they grow really, really old. And what's it like to run into these residents? And I know you've had several that are up over 100 years old. I mean, I feel like you're seeing more and more people in their hundreds than ever before. As someone who runs these kind of communities, how cool is it to run into folks like that?
It's absolutely amazing. One of our residents, her name is Annie, and she is 109.
Wow.
She was born before telephones were really a thing. And so being able to Zoom chat with Annie was absolutely amazing. But what is interesting to me is if you meet some of our residents, even those that are over 100 years old, you might not even realize that they are over 100 years old because they're vibrant, they are exciting, they have so much knowledge and wisdom to share, and they've got the time to share it. It is one of the things that makes me incredibly happy is spending time in our communities with our residents and to spend time with our National Resident Advisory Council. We meet with them regularly to learn about our services, to get their perspectives on how we're doing and to get their ideas. And it's just such a privilege to get to work with our nation's seniors.
Let me talk about the future of these senior living communities. We talked about the fact that we may be a bit of a crunch soon enough because there's just not enough building going on. But in terms of what you're doing and the demand, is there more development that's going to be needed in the not so near future when it comes to Brookdale and your scope across the country?
I do think that there is such a growing demand in seniors that are turning 75 and older. As I mentioned, between 2021 and 2025, that population is expected to grow 20%. And if you think about 1 million new customers entering our target market every year for the next decade, that certainly is going to create a lot of demand for our product. And so I'm excited about our opportunity to provide services for these seniors, to help them with the challenges of aging, and really to welcome them into our communities.
Well, it's been an inspiring story, an inspiring book. It is titled Heroes Work Here, an extraordinary story of courage, resilience, and hope from the front lines of COVID-19. She is Lucinda Baier, President and CEO of Brookdale Senior Living. Cindy, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Joe, it was great to be with you.
And that'll do it for another episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.